YouTube is always delayed. Give that a second to load, and then I'll go live on the recording. There we go. All right. Welcome back to Boss Uncaged podcast. So this show, I almost guarantee that if you don't laugh, then obviously our sense of humor is probably going to go a little bit above your pay grade. But I guarantee you, we're probably going to say some smart ass shit during this episode. And I was thinking about like, how do I name this guest, right? So his name is easy enough. I'm going to name him the Mischief Boss. I really wanted to name him something more related to Marvel, but I don't feel like getting a Marvel lawsuit because I'm thinking he's more like that character than anything else. So why don't you go ahead and tell our audience a little bit more about who you are and what are we talking about today, Seth?
Yeah, so I am Seth Erickson. I'm the chief mischief maker at Storify agency. And essentially what we do is we work with startups to help them clearly communicate their value to investors and to the marketplace.
Very cool. Very cool. So, I mean, with that, I mean, obviously reading your bio, like I want to start at like the beginning, right? In your bio, you were saying something about in school going head to head with a teacher. So like, let's talk about that story. So we can establish like how we're going to unroll your story today.
Oh man, that's so it's actually a story that that my mom likes to tell, which is that she pulled up to the school. This is basically like preschool, and the teacher met her at the front, and she thought, "Oh crap, what did my son do?" Right? Because I was always doing something. Thought I was in trouble, and she pulled my mom aside and said, "Your son is doing something we've never seen any other children do." And she said, "Well, what's that?" And she said, "Well, we kind of have this like, it's like a little test where you put up three panels, and then the kids look at it, and they just want to make sure they're comprehending and understanding what's happening. So it's like a rabbit, and then there's a stick, and then the bear has the stick, and the kid goes, the rabbit gave the bear the stick, or the bear picked up, whatever." Me, I look at the rabbit, I give him a name, I start creating a backstory for the rabbit, and then give the bear a name, start saying the bear's backstory, and then explain what they're going to do later on in the afternoon. Right. So I'm going way beyond, what the quote unquote test is asking for. And yeah, the teacher was like, we've never seen a child do that. Like they just usually answer, whatever questions we ask them about it. But yeah, so I was doing that kind of stuff as a child. And part of my journey is actually realizing that I was I guess you would say a closet storyteller. Like I masquerading as a designer because I was really skilled at design and people paid me a lot of money to do design. And I thought I'm a designer, and I had to kind of go through this whole journey of kind of going, no, I'm a storyteller. Well, what does that mean? How do I make money as a storyteller? Because I don't plan on going to Hollywood and writing scripts or writing a book. Little did I know. So, it was a long journey, kind of to figure out my purpose, if you will.
Nice. So I mean, the reason why I wanted to start off with that, I mean, obviously, like that's what you do, right? I mean, and the thing that I talk about a lot, just branding and storytelling, and like these two things have to go together. If they're not working together, then the chemistry is completely wrong. So again, like if you could define yourself in 5 words, what would those 3 to 5 words be?
That's a good question. I feel like I'm a pretty dynamic person, so trying to just describe myself in 5 words. I mean, I think mischief maker, like I'm a storyteller and a mischief maker. Those two kind of go hand in hand. Like you mentioned Marvel earlier. I'm probably more Loki than I am, Captain America or Iron Man. You know, and the reason I say that is because Loki is quite often creating mischief to see what the response is. He's kind of a scientist in some ways, and often he's poking people to get them to kind of evaluate their decisions and what they're doing. And so I do that a lot for clients. So I don't think I quite answered your question, but yeah, I'm a storyteller. through and through. So.
Yeah, I mean the fact that you compared yourself to Loki. I mean, behind the scenes, before I even got on this podcast, and I'm reading his bio and I'm looking at his profile, and I'm like, I'm about to interview damn Loki. This is going. So, like, how do you go from being such a tenacious kid, a storytelling kid, graphic designer? Like, how do you kind of combine that to create the business that you have right now? Like, what did that story look like?
Well, so, like I said before, I started as an illustrator. I sold my first design to a t-shirt company when I was 14. I thought I'm going to be rich. But that's like nothing. It was $200. So in my mind, I was going to be rich. And so what I took away from that was like, oh, I'm a good designer. I can make money doing this. And so I just kind of kept doing it and doing it and doing it until I got to the point where, like we talked about a little bit before the show, I built a company, had 22 people, was making really good money, and was very dissatisfied in my job. And the reason I was dissatisfied was that I was not pushing the needle forward for my clients. Like, they would pay me for design. We won a bunch of awards, blah, 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 blah. But I was asking them, like, are you getting more sales? Are more people reaching out to you? Well, no, but we're really happy with the design. And I was like, and fuck the design. Like, and that's when I kind of had this epiphany of like, okay, I need to get better at something else because this is not working, or it's not working the way I want it to work, which is to help my clients and grow their business and help them, change things for the better. And um, so a friend of mine in 2015 said, dude, you're a storyteller, right? Like, aside from that experience as a child and doing a bunch of crazy stuff in lit class, I never thought I'm a storyteller. I just thought this is something I do. I don't think about it. It's like breathing, and he goes, you're a storyteller. He gave me this book called Story Wars by Jonas Sachs. I read the book, was completely fascinated with it. It was like I got hit by lightning. And I went on a like an Audible binge, like a freaking addict. Like, I was buying those 3 credit packs. I was like, Daddy needs another hit, like, we got to do this. And yeah, so I think I raised Audible stock at least 15% in that year. And I read over 50 books. And when I started reading the books, some of the books mentioned the neuroscience stuff. And I was like, wait, there's science around this? Like, I mean, I was already sold, right? I was like, yeah, story, great. And then with the neuroscience stuff, I was like, well, if there's neuroscience about this, there's got to be papers. And so I went and read another 200 or 300 papers. They're really fucking boring, so you don't have to go read them. You can just read my book. I kind of distill that information down for you. And I was like, okay, so we got the science, so we have some proof here. This isn't just me, trying to blow smoke up your ass. And I'm into the storytelling thing. And like I said, the Story Wars book, that guy was running an agency. So I start kind of going down the marketing path and going, well, do they use storytelling in marketing? And what I was seeing was it was more being used in the branding side of things. And like, you mentioned before, like I see story, like, if you're going to build a brand, like, story is is kind of the caramel nougaty center that you need. And everything else kind of flows out from there. And yeah, so that's kind of how I got here. And yeah, it was a lot of change. We had to rebrand the agency. We rebranded to Storify. And Storify just means to tell or narrate in story. So it's a very descriptive of what we do and how we help the people we work with.
I don't expect anything less. I mean, you're a storyteller, so I mean, and that's why, like, I love the way you're going to answer these questions. So, like, even with that, right? Like, I think this next one is like a gateway for you to be more on the mischievous side, right? So, what is like the worst example or the worst case scenario you ever dealt with in storytelling in your business? Like, it could be the worst client, it could be the worst experience. Like, just tell a story about, like, how did that happen and how did you overcome that?
Um, Well, I mean, I've definitely had some bad experiences with clients. Y- you know, I would say that at the end, I usually end up firing the client, right? And as entrepreneurs, like most entrepreneurs are like, fire a client. That's like a strange concept, right? Like the mindset is more like you say jump, I say how high, right?
Mm,
Like, and so, but yeah, like I worked with a client one time who paid me $500 and wanted about 100 hours worth of work, and I was making about like $2 an hour by the time this thing's done, and they were um, calling me at like 10 o'clock at night, asking me to make changes and whatnot. And it took me actually quite a long time to realize um, the reason you have bad clients is not because of the clients, it's because of you.
mm,
You're the one who's accepting them and taking them on as clients, even though you're completely ignoring your gut and not able to separate, like, yes, you're getting paid, but you're going to go through hell, and that sucks. So but yeah, like I mean, I've definitely had some clients that I've uh, had some bad interactions with, and I've been mischievous with them, where I just start kind of fucking with them because I'm like, I'm tired of your bullshit. And you know, they would say something to me, and I would take it and I would agree with them, but I would blow it up into this, completely bombastic, response. Like, yes, I am totally going to create these 5 new pages that you didn't pay for. Also, I'm going to come to your house. I'm going to clean it. I'm going to wash your car. I'm going to put your kids to bed, and then maybe later I'll pick up some groceries for you. That's what I'm going to do.
mm. That is hilarious. And I'm sure, without naming names, those clients, if they do listen to this podcast, they're probably sitting there saying, this son of a bitch right
Oh, they were saying that before they saw the podcast, so it's okay.
So let's talk. I mean, obviously, like you've had a career with multiple different things, and I think that we talked off air. We talked about the commonalities between our
Mhm.
histories, right? I mean, there's so many different things that both of us have done, and you've kind of taken all these things and you've streamlined it into where you are right now. So the perception for the average listener is like, okay, this guy, he's telling clients to F off. I wish I had a client, right? He
Yeah.
he has this system in place, and he's a graphic designer. He's done this, he's done that, he's done all these different things. But in reality, how long has it taken you on your journey to get from where you were day one to where you are right now?
20 years. Yeah. And I guess this goes back to the question you asked before too. Branding was where I took all my design knowledge and was able to pair it with storytelling and start to create something that was like, oh, this makes sense, right? Like, because you need good design, but like with branding, like good design is like wearing nice clothes, right? Like the person inside, right? What do they say? How do they act? How do they treat you? What is the experience you have with them? It doesn't matter if you dress an asshole up in nice clothes, he's still an asshole. So,
Yeah.
you know, I just see the design aspect of that as just being one element, but the story is kind of like, how do you talk, right? Like what kind of, you know, like one of the things that we talk with our clients about in this concept of story is, what is your brand archetype, and understanding based on your brand archetype, that's how you need to talk to your clients,
Mm,
right? Like with us, like I said, we're kind of Loki. So you know the book that I wrote is throws in lots of humor, says lots of inappropriate things because that's on brand with how we are, but it may not be for our clients. And so we're always talking about like the communication style, right? Like lots of companies do this stuff where they just talk in corporate speak, or it's very safe, right? Or very bland. And so we work with our clients to go, okay, who do you want to be, right? Like, are you the rebel? Are you the magician, right? Are you the muse? Like,
mhm.
figure that out, and then we'll start to write the language that works with that, right? um a guy just recently showed me a brand called Liquid Death, and they're basically a water brand, but they're like a heavy metal water brand. you know, and I think their tagline is like kill thirst or something like that. And like the whole branding message goes all together with who they are as a company, right? And I see a lot of businesses who basically don't even have a brand because they would just be vanilla, you know, in how they talk, how they communicate, the experiences they give people, everything. It's just, it's all the same. And they're basically commoditizing themselves. So.
Nice, nice. I mean, to what you're saying about the brand archetype, and I just finished like speaking about this, right? And you can correct me if I'm wrong, or you can kind of give me some insight to what I'm about to say and what your thoughts are on this. And I
Sure.
always say you have to look at a brand from a perspective of there's four aspects to any universal brand, right? The first is the personal brand, the story of the individual or the owner or the executives, right? And then
Mhm.
you have the company brand, which is essentially part of the secondary story of the individual, and then you have a service brand and you have a product brand. And I think a lot of times people they don't really look at their services and their products as individual brands. And I'm just like, well, why not? Personify them, make them real life, make them have associations, give them psychology behind them, make people attached to them. And the statement that I always say is like, can your brand for your product or service stand up in a bar conversation? Is somebody going to walk away from that brand because it's so boring, or are they going to stay there and sit in that bar and have all the communications, all the talks, and buy your brand more drinks? What's your
Mhm.
thoughts on
Um, well, I like the analogy, and I agree with you. I think there is a different story for each one of those elements, and understanding that they're different elements to each one of those stories as well. So, um, like people ask me about personal branding, for instance, and I'm like, you know, and so they'll say, well, this is my story, right? And I'll be like, okay, but when it comes to a personal brand, you need to position yourself as basically the mentor, right? Like you have gone through this experience, you've learned these things, right? And be able to talk about what have you learned through that experience. Whereas a lot of people will just tell a story and they're like, and now I'm a CEO. It's like,
that?
there's what's the takeaway, dude? Like, give me something to work with here.
Yeah.
Like, you didn't just keep working and then end up as a CEO. Like, you learned things along the way. You had trials and tribulations. You overcame things. You went through the freaking hero's journey, right? So, talk about that, right? Like, and so you kind of have to position it a little bit differently. Whereas, you know, the company's brand, um, you know, you tend to talk more about like here's, or at least this is how we advise, you tend to talk more about the problem, right? This is the problem that you have as the customer, and I am here to help you overcome that problem. I understand that problem at a deep level, right? So it's a slightly different story. um, Whereas the products, I mean, uh, services can follow the same kind of model of like problem solution that that a brand can use, but products, like you said, you can make them have personality, right? Like you can tell funny little stories and really interesting stories about like how your product, you know, goes skydiving on the weekend, right? You're just like creating or scuba diving or whatever, right? Like you're creating like fun little quirky things that most people are like, this is my product, here's what's in it, you know, and it has zero personality. They're like, you know, it's 7 ounces, it's made with, you know, this oil, you know, or whatever, and it's like there's no story. And so so products in particular, I like the idea of creating a personality, like you said, what does this product do, and thinking about it in that way instead of just being like listing all the facts about the product. It's like
Yep.
that's
Yeah.
not engaging at all.
Well, I think what we're creating is like, you know, the telltale sign of the scales, right? On one side is all the features, right? And again, you could look at all the features. It's a camera and it does 1080p and it does all these different things. And it's like, that's all the features. But what the hell are the benefits of that camera? And I
Mhm.
think if you could tell the story of the benefits, this camera will captivate you while you're jumping off a cliff doing a back dive without making you look blurry. It's same as saying it has, you know, shock absorbent, whatever inside the camera. So I think to your point, I mean, being able to tell the story and personify it and utilizing those benefits versus the features is a hell of a lot more useful than itemizing out all the bells and whistles that the product may have.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, it's yeah, so I totally agree with like how you're kind of breaking it down and categorizing it.
Mhm.
um One of the things that like, so like with branding, you if you go Google what is branding, you're going to get 100 different explanations, and then it gets confusing, right? Because well, this person says this and this person says that. Um, Marty Neumeyer has a great quote that I really like. He said, "Branding or marketing is what you tell people about your company, but branding is what other people say about you." I may have butchered that, but well, we'll work through it. And the way that I try to describe it to people is think of your brand as a person, right? Um, what is the experience you want your customer to have? It's like, you can think of a friend and, you know, is that is that friend fun? Is that friend, how do they dress? How do they talk? How do they act? Right? What is the experience you have with them? You know, one friend you might be like, I love hanging out with this person because they always make me laugh and we go on these crazy adventures. And another friend, you might be like, I love just chilling with this guy because he gets like super philosophical or whatever. We have these deep conversations, right? They're not the same, right? And that's kind of how I see, or at least I try to explain branding to people so that they can kind of visualize what they're looking for and how all these pieces kind of fit together. So
Very cool, very cool. So I mean, I mean, obviously, I think we went down like a rabbit hole that's definitely going to be fruitful. Anybody that's listening to hear two people go back and forth like that is definitely interesting. But even more, I want to talk about a little bit more about like your story, right? So if you could time travel back, right? We're talking about Loki, right? And I mean, obviously, Loki's all over the damn place. So if you can pop from where you are back in time to anywhere that you can recall that you have an opportunity to speak to yourself and say a couple words in your ears to change your outcome of where you are to make it happen a lot faster, when would you go back to and what would you say to yourself?
well, I think first I'd have to get over the shock of myself time traveling. I'd be like, how the hell did you do that, dude? I mean, like, what's going on in the future, man? You're not a time, you're not the science guy. I don't know how this happened. You trip and fall into a machine you shouldn't have been playing with. Um, so yeah, I would actually tell myself to just to start investing in understanding storytelling, like because like I said, I took it like a lot of people take it, which is I just do this, so I don't think about it, right? And what I learned through the process was like how to be better at the thing that I was doing naturally, right? Like I equate it to like breathing, where it's like everybody breathes, right? Well, everybody tells stories, and like with breathing, like all these really crazy things have started, happening where like people, do sports and they're learning how to breathe to improve their performance. And then we got this guy, Wim Hof, like crazy son of a bitch, is like sitting in 0 degree temperature and keeping his body temperature up, through breathing. That's like, holy shit, man. There's a lot of crazy stuff you can do with something that like just seems so benign.
Yeah.
And storytelling is kind of the same way. It's like, do you want to have a deeper connection with people? Get better at telling stories and telling them in the right way. Do you want your customers to remember you like long after they saw your website or your one ad or whatever? Tell a really good story that will stick with people. That kind of stuff, when you become really good at it, not only helps them remember you in the short term, it helps them remember you in the long term, right? And too many brands and companies, they have to keep reminding people who they are because they just keep saying a bunch of boring crap. And but the story cuts through all that. So yeah, I would want to I'd want to tell myself, like, start learning about story, not just, the concept of story, but how do you tell a good story? What are the pieces that make a good story? What is the hero's journey? How does that apply to, the way that you communicate with people? Because that would have gotten me way further down the path a lot faster.
Very interesting. So I mean, with that, I mean, still continuing on the path of unfolding, who you are, right?
Mhm.
You talked about your mom for a bit there. So again, I mean, you're a hell of an entrepreneur, but you're also a hell of a storyteller. Like this has to formulate genetically, maybe from somebody down that bloodline. So, are you coming from an entrepreneurial background? Was your mom the storyteller? Was your dad the entrepreneur? Like, where did this come from that you can kind of look back and think about?
Um, well, interestingly enough, my father was a very talented illustrator, although he worked in construction. Um, because in his era, it was like you're never going to make money doing art. Like you need to get a real job. And so that's kind of what his parents told him, but he still drew lots of stuff. I mean, the guy could like literally, you could say, draw me, you could point at something and say, draw me that. And he could draw it in almost realistic, illustration, just with a pencil. But at the same time, he spent all day like doing remodel and construction, laying tile, like pouring concrete, building framing for houses, doing roofs. Um, so he was kind of an entrepreneur in that sense, but nobody in my family really did entrepreneurship. Um, as far as storytelling, I can't say that my dad or my mom were big storytellers. My grandfather, I remember sitting with my grandfather a lot when I was young, and he would tell me stories of, you know, living through the Great Depression and, World War II and I was always fascinated by that. Plus he was a big history guy, so he would always talk about like, oh, this thing happened, and like he loved World War II. He was like, this thing happened in World War II, and this battle happened, and this thing and this thing and this thing. I mean, the dude was like the History Channel junkie. He just like flip on, and but then he would talk about all the stuff he was learning or the books he had read or whatever. um so maybe through my mom's line, but my mom, you know she's not, wouldn't be a what I would consider a storyteller. Just, I don't know, I got the random gene lottery, I don't know.
Hilarious. So I mean, continuing on the family, right? So I mean, like, how do you currently juggle like your family life with your work life?
uh it's a little bit of a challenge right now. I actually got divorced last year, so I'm now doing the single dad thing. But I do have some family helping out, and it's a little bit challenging, but yeah, like as an entrepreneur, I think it's always a struggle because I find my brain still working on work or problems or trying to solve things, after work time is over. And it's a conscious effort to try to be more present so that I'm not like sitting at the dinner table just staring off into the
Mhm.
distance while my children are talking to me. Um, and so I have to like pull myself back to that. But yeah, I mean, and it's definitely, and then you get, sometimes you get client calls. I don't get them like late like I used to, but every now and again, somebody's calling at like 5:30 and it's dinner time, and it's like, hey, I'll call you back after I get my kids down, but I can't talk right now. like, um, so I had to start setting some boundaries around that, uh, around those things to better manage it, right? Because I wasn't setting any boundaries before, and it was just the business was running my life. I wasn't running the business.
Hmm. Very nice. Very. I mean, it's crazy that you said that because I mean, obviously, I think there's so many similarities between us, and I had an entire decade plus being an only a household with just a son and a dad, like, and just raising him in that environment. So I definitely know what you're talking about, like having to be attentive, having to be there in that space, but also at the same time figuring out how to turn off the other side of you, which is always constantly on, no matter what you're doing. And then
Mm,
as soon as that kid goes to sleep, you're back on the grind, or you're taking those notes or recording content or whatever it is. So I definitely commend you in that journey, man. I've been there, I've done that, and I know it's a hell of a journey, but it's gonna, I think where you are now is probably going to be so compounded. It's going to be so much larger because now you have this responsibility on your own. It's going to grow you leaps and bounds for sure.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, the last year, there's just been a ton of growth in my life. And, like I said, I had never planned on writing a book. And then one day I was like, I'm writing a book. And it was weird because it was almost like the book was coming out of me like I was vomiting. It was just like blah, and it took me 2.5 weeks to write the book. It took, way longer to get it actually edited, but um, you know, I wrote it because it was just like uh the shit is just pouring out of me. I need to put it somewhere. And I realized later after that like I'd gained all this knowledge and experience, and at some point in the future, it's going to be gone. So putting it down in a book, you know, gives it the ability to live on, and potentially help somebody who's never met me, never talked to me, you know, never worked with me. And so, but I didn't realize that at the time. I was just like, crap, I got all these thoughts and I got to get them out of my head because it's driving me crazy. So, so yeah, but yeah, I mean, it just lots of changes. So,
Right. So, I mean, with that, I mean, obviously your schedule has shifted and, you know, pretty much life happens. So like in today, right? Like what does your morning routines, your morning schedules look like?
So it varies. Like some days I'm doing a podcast like this, at least in this current season to kind of promote the book and whatnot. You know, I'm doing client work. You know, I share custody. So some days I'm like, you know, getting the kids going and dressed and out the door to school. Some days I'm not. I try to go walking for a few miles 3 days a week so that I'm staying in better shape. So it's a mix, but and then sometimes it's just, you know, reading. Like I am constantly trying to learn and trying to get better. So I'll fit in, you know, a half hour to an hour here and there, reading a book. And then, yeah, I mean, once the day is done, I'm back reading again. You know, like I said, I love Audible. So I'm reading while I'm driving, I'm reading while I'm walking, you know, I'm just constantly like trying to learn and get better and go, how do I improve the skills I have? Because if I can improve those, then I can help more people. I can push bigger levers in their business. And that to me is really exciting. So
Nice. I mean, I think that's a hell of a segue to my next question. And I mean, earlier on, you talked about reading 52 books, and you know, just by being a podcast host, I had the opportunity to ask this question to a lot of different individuals. So because of that, I created a book club, and in that book club, I'm promoting and pushing everyone to read a book per week, much like you read 52 books in a year. So my next question is a three-part question, right? I want to know, what books did you read in the first part of your journey? Like what books helped you to get to where you currently are? Second question is, what books or audiobooks are you actively listening to right now? And then the third part is, you know, you alluded to writing a book and having a book. Like what is that book and what is that book about and how do people get access to it?
okay. Yeah. So um, like I mentioned, the first book on storytelling I read was Story Wars by Jonas Sachs. And in there he talked about Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey. So I, you know, read The Hero's Journey by Joseph Campbell, and then I read Story by Robert McKee. I read some Lisa Cron books. I can't remember the names of all of them, but I mean, if you look her up, you'll find, you know, those books on storytelling. But I read a bunch of different books, right? Like most of them weren't about marketing. They were about either how to write a good story, or like Story by Robert McKee is about script writing, right? Like, but in that you still learn how to tell a good story, like what works, what doesn't work, why do you need this thing, not that thing, what is the order of operations, you know. So those are some of the books that I read at that time. What I'm reading right now is I've got, actually, hold on, let me just look in Audible because I actually have multiple books going at the same time.
Very
I'm
nice.
reading Hooked: How to Build Habit Forming Products, 100 Million Offers, and Unscripted. And those are all completely different. You know, one is about how to make good offers. Unscripted is about living. How do you not live the basic script of life, which I think a lot of entrepreneurs already do naturally, right? Like they're not like, oh, I need to get a college degree, then I need to get a job, then I need to, you know, marry somebody, then I need to have 2.5 kids, I need the white picket fence house. It's like, the whole concept of unscripted is like, no, how do you create the life that you actually want, that you will actually enjoy, and not follow the script of what everybody else does. So I think that's a really interesting one, and obviously that kind of appeals to my personality. So my book is called How to Hack Humans: Storytelling for Startups, and it's actually on Amazon right now for pre-order until October 15th, and then the book will go full price. But if you don't have a Kindle, you can wait till it comes out on the 15th. It'll be in paperback and hardcover, which I was like, oh, hardcover, that's a new feature. Yeah, and then anybody who's interested, they can go to storifyagency.com/uncaged to download the first chapter of the book for free. It focuses on the neuroscience aspect. So, what does science say about this? It's not me just, like I said, just making up a bunch of bullshit. Like, this stuff has been researched, and we're learning new things all the freaking time about the brain. And so it's a really interesting topic for anybody who's interested.
Very cool. Very cool. So, I mean, with that, I mean, obviously this is your first book. And I think obviously once you kind of crack the system of creating books, I think you have way more books inside of you that are just going to start spilling out. Like you said, you were vomiting out and you were just writing content, right? So with that, where do you see yourself 20 years from right now?
Well, so I think I can answer this by explaining what the vision of our company is. So, there's an often quoted 90% failure rate in startups. I've worked with over 100, and I've only seen 2 exits, and one was actually more of a hostile takeover than an actual exit. So I've often questioned, is 90% like the accurate number, or is that just us being positive about a really bad failure rate? But the goal of Storify Agency is to work with startups and even small businesses and entrepreneurs to reduce that failure rate by 10%. So if I look to the future, I want to be able to, in 20 years, point back and say, even if we don't hit 10%, right? Like, well, we reduced it by 5%, and that made a big fucking dent. And that, helped so many people, has ripple effects on the economy, on, companies being able to help their customers, employment, like, yeah, that's where I hope to be in 20 years.
Nice. I mean, I think to your point, I mean, you talk about economy, you talk about more of a global economy, right? To that effect, right? You're trying to help startups, which is essentially the bedrock to everything that we're all working towards, kind of evolve into businesses, small businesses, and then eventually, hopefully, into large corporations, if that's the direction they want to go into. So, starting from the ground floor up, and you're helping them tell their stories, makes them more stronger companies later on. So, I definitely commend you for that, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, they gotta get their story straight, if you will. And build a brand from the beginning, right? Like, a lot of startups work like they're building an airplane while they're flying it, and I get that, but how you communicate, right? Like, if you take your product to the market and nobody cares, and you can't answer the question the customer has in their mind of why the fuck should I care about your product, then you're dead. Like, and at the end of the day, no matter how cool your tech is, you still have to deal with humans. And if you're dealing with humans, you got to be able to talk to them. You got to be able to communicate with them. You can't play charades with them or pantomime. You got to use words. and often those words are written down on paper, on a website, in an ad. And so that's how you communicate. So.
Yeah, rightfully so. So, I mean, with that, right? I mean, obviously, you're talking about writing, you're talking about a lot of different communication devices on the application side. Like, what software would you say that you would not be able to do what you're doing without having access to it?
I guess a dirty little secret is I'm terrible at grammar. So Grammarly is a piece of software that I think Grammarly hates me, actually. It's like I hit that button and it just goes, here's all the things you did wrong. you piece of shit. Why are you making me work so hard? You know, like I use that. I use the Hemingway editor because like the Hemingway editor is great at being like, your sentences are just too complicated, dude. Like you're trying to say too much. Get to the fucking point. So those two, I use Google Docs. That's how I wrote the book. I wrote it in a Google Doc, and then paid a fantastic designer to off of Fiverr of all places to format the book, do the graphics and everything. It was like $35. I was like, you should be getting paid a lot more for this, but I will take advantage of you since you are letting me.
Man, that's hilarious. So I mean, that's your software side. So I mean, ideally, who's your ideal custom avatar? I mean, you're talking about startups. So I mean, what's kind of tell their stories a little bit? Like, who is that person? Is it John? Is he playing golf, or is it like Michael and he's jumping off a boat, or is it Susan and she's going through the store with her kids? Like, who is the ideal avatar for what you guys do?
Yeah, so we we've worked actually with all kinds of different startups. Like everybody usually thinks tech when they think startups, but I mean, we've worked with nonprofits. We've worked with like currently we're working with like an exercise company that's a startup. We're working with a CBD makeup company that's a startup. Um, I yeah, honestly, like I'm looking for people who want to change their industry or change the world. Some people that I talk to that have startups, I know their goal is making money, right? And that's okay. But um, I'm looking for something a little bit bigger. And so yeah, like I don't like I say startups because most people understand what a startup is, but um, the reason I like startups is because a lot of these founders are, they're the crazy ones, right? Like they're the rebels, the mavericks, right? That I mean, Apple talked about that, like, I don't know, 10, 20 years ago, however long that it's been since that campaign came out. The people who want to change things, you find a lot of those people in the startup industry. And those are the people that I want to work with because I'm I find similarity there with those people. And um so to me it's like I don't care what your startup is, as long as you don't, it's not about money, it's about changing things. And that to me is the most interesting.
Very cool. So, if you had to say like a final last words of wisdom to an individual that fits that category of your ideal avatar, what insight would you give to them to keep them motivated on their journey to success?
Motivated. um yeah, I mean, that's a good question because obviously, doing a startup, like you have days that like you're just winning everything, and then you have days that like everything is going wrong and crashing. So I would say, you know, you need a strong vision for your company, because if you don't have that, without it, you're going to get lost. Like I think running a company without a vision is like driving a car without a steering wheel, right? Like you can push the gas, you can hit the brakes, but if the road turns, you may be flying off the cliff. And the vision helps steer your actions, your decisions, and because you understand where you're trying to go. And I ran a company without a vision, and yeah, I ran that son of a bitch right off the road. um, and when we rebuilt and rebranded, I came back and I said, okay, I got to figure this thing out first, right? Like I need to know what we're doing, where we're going. And the reason um, the reason I say that is because um, having a vision, it's a future state. This is where we want to go. So every action that I take is focused on how do I get to that future state. But it's also a story, right? It's a story that you can tell to your employees, to anybody who may be thinking about working with you. Like, this is where I want to go. Isn't that great, right? And the other thing is, don't make the vision about yourself. Like, I've heard people be like, well, our vision is to make $2 million by next year. And it's like, well, nobody fucking cares, dude, because that vision is about you. I think a strong vision is like building a house that other people can see themselves living in, right? Like your vision should draw other people in, and when those people come in, they can go, I know how I can help push this thing forward. I know what we're doing today because I know where we're going, right? Like without it, you're just, getting your car on the road and who knows where you're going to end up. And yeah, so yeah, make sure you figure that out. Like, I think that's really important.
Very nice. So the listener that's listening right now is probably, thinking about, okay, I love this guy. I love his energy. I want to get in contact with him, right? Like, so how do someone get in contact with you? I mean, obviously there's social media, there's websites, there's podcasts, like funnel them in. Where do you want them to go?
Yeah, so I mean, the main way to get a hold of me is just to go to storifyagency.com. That's just STORIFY agency.com. There's a button on there, either says schedule a call or something like that. And we can definitely sit down and chat. Other than that, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. That's like the platform I use the most because it's business focused. I tend to kind of like say random shit on Facebook and then post an image on Instagram like every 6 months. So so I'm not on those platforms as much, but on LinkedIn you can connect with me and you can start a chat or whatever, or just hit the website and you can schedule a call. We got, like everybody else, we got calendars and all that fun stuff. So it's easy to do.
Nice. So we're going into the bonus round. I got a couple bonus questions for you. I think the first and foremost, I think, like going back to the commonalities that we share. I mean, I think indirectly, without you saying it, you're you're an adventure or adrenaline junkie of sorts. So let's talk about some of your pastimes and some of your hobbies.
Sure. So I took up Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu last year. Great time to take up a close quarter combat sport. I have been a scuba diver since 2004, so I've done about 150 dives. I've been to, I don't know, 7, 8 different countries, most of which are islands. Most people wouldn't consider them countries, but I've been to like Turks and Caicos, Aruba, Bimini, Mexico, Belize. So I've dove all over, and then on, not necessarily an adrenaline junkie type thing, I do some artwork, and I also produce electronic music on the side. So I keep myself busy.
Yeah, I think that's an understatement, right? So I got another one for you, right? And I think
Yeah.
this is pretty interesting with your diverse background. If you could spend 24 hours with anyone, dead or alive, uninterrupted for those 24 hours, who would it be and why?
Who would it be? Uh, this is probably going to seem like a simplistic answer, but I think Elon Musk is a total crazy ass, but I would love to hang out with him and just kind of like talk about the future. Because obviously he's pushing a lot of things forward. And he also has a very unique perspective on just about everything he does, how he runs his business, where he's going next. And so I think it would be really interesting to sit down with him and just pick his brain and see what he has to say. And like I said, it may be some crazy ass shit, but
Yeah.
but some of the things that he's been doing is I think definitely pushing the needle forward for humanity, like creating Tesla, trying to move towards, being more electricity focused versus like, fossil fuels, going into space. It's like I read a ton of science fiction, and it's like I'm like, in my lifetime, like we're probably going to start having like round trips to the moon, and it's like it's because of what he's doing and what Jeff Bezos is doing and Richard Branson are doing. They're pushing the envelope and saying, and to the point where like space flight becomes normalized. Well, when space flight becomes normalized, then going to other planets becomes normalized, then colonizing other planets becomes normalized, then people having kids on other planets and growing up becomes a normalized thing. But you got to start somewhere, and we're seeing that right now. So it's awesome.
Yeah, it's definitely awesome. I think we're at the dawn of things that we've read about as kids through comic books or we've
Right.
seen on TV and sci-fi. We're living sci-fi now, like to
Yeah.
your point, to where people are like non-astronauts are leaving the atmosphere. It's kind of like what the think about that. Like back in the 60s, they were just trying to get outside the atmosphere, and now it's kind of like we're just sending up random people into space and they're gonna come back down perfectly fine, considering that NASA has blown up probably more rockets than they want to tell us about, right? So
Oh
it's
yeah,
crazy.
SpaceX the same thing, man. I mean, they're blowing up rockets. Like it seems like once a month, and it's like, oh yeah, yeah. Can you imagine? I mean, being in the 1960s, and they're like, yeah, okay, so we got this tin can, we're gonna pressurize it, and then strap a fucking rocket to it, and
Mhm.
then we're gonna hope you make it back. And somebody was like, I'll do that. Sign me up, please. Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of like Interstellar is like one of my favorite movies. It's kind of like when you just see Interstellar. So what you're talking about is kind of like once we figure out like the whole time thing and figure out how to collapse time and space is we're into a whole nother ball game, man, for sure.
That is a
So
great movie. It's actually one of my favorite of Christopher Nolan's. Although I really like Tenet. Like, man. So,
cool. So going into closing, man, I like to, give the Boss Uncaged podcast over to my guests. And the microphone is yours. The show is yours. Do you have any questions that you would like to ask me?
yeah. I mean, here's a question. I mean, how would you summarize what you've learned from your journey? Because you've had so many different kind of roles, and you've evolved as you've gone through those things. Like, what would you say your takeaway has been through that process?
Takeaway is simple, man. Break a lot of eggs a lot faster. I mean, I think a lot of people they're scared, man. I think fear is such a huge factor to where when you come out of college, you're thinking about, okay, I have to work to provide, or I have to make money to survive, or whatever it is. But in those first, I would say probably from ages 15 to 25, like that 10-year, break as many eggs, travel, explore, dibble, dabble. If you have opportunity to go somewhere and you're like, okay, I'm short $50, find the damn $50 and make it happen. Because once you get older, that's when the responsibility really starts to kick in. So why not live your life as an adventure from day one and take
Mhm.
all those things that you learn in a young age and compile them and make them into an experience for someone else. And that way you can kind of give back what you've learned to educate other people so they can have the same experiences. Because like, we travel, right?
Mhm.
And a lot of times you're traveling, you're looking around and you're like on a cruise ship and you're like, everybody on this damn cruise ship is my grandparent, right? On the plane, right? You go somewhere like, like you're talking about Belize, and you look around and it's like 50% of the flight could be my grandparents. And because they're the ones that have lived a life long enough to have the capital, the resources to kind of pay for it, we have to figure out how to do that at a younger age so we can be 25, 30 years old on a plane right there next to the old guys saying, hey, I've done what you've done, and half the time, maybe I can help your kids or your grandkids experience what you're experiencing now at a younger age.
Mhm. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah, I mean, I like when I was 26, I just was like, I'm going to London. Like I did that, went to South Africa for World Cup, went to Hong Kong, went to Japan, um, and like, yeah, traveling, it also opens up your eyes to see more of what's going on in the world, because I think in the US, we tend to be very US centric.
Mhm.
Um, and when you travel, like you also meet like random people from other countries too. Like we hung out with some Lithuanians one night in London, and it was a blast. Like, and it was like these are people from halfway around the world. We don't know each other, but we're connecting, we're sharing stories, we're getting to know one another, and we're having a good time. And it's like um the same thing happened in Hong Kong, like and in Japan. Like we met people who were like really cool. It's like there's so much more outside of the US, although we have a lot, right? And so that's why it's like A lot of people just travel within the US. Like, you know, you want mountains, you go to the mountains, you want beach, you go to the beach. I mean, we have all this great stuff and, you know, really great cities and whatnot, but there's so much more outside of our country, and getting out and experiencing that and seeing how people are, how they think, how they view the world, I think expands your perspective. So I definitely agree with what you're saying. Like, yeah, don't wait to travel, you know, until you're too old to go out all night partying in London. So yeah, I think it changes you when you travel, you know.
I think it definitely does. To your point that you made earlier about traveling to space, right? You know, Elon and you know all these other guys like Jeff Bezos, they've done the traveling and now they're trying to travel to other planets. So you still got people that are like in a state and they've been in that state for their entire life. So I mean, think about it. By the time you catch up to trying to travel the world, we're going to Mars. And then from Mars, probably Saturn, right? So you just kind of have to kind of figure out like where are you on the spectrum, but you're so behind the curve. And to your point, like you may meet somebody in Germany that's from Japan, but eventually you're gonna meet somebody in Mars that's from Saturn. So like you gotta figure out how to kind of expand a little bit more for sure.
Oh man, when you when you said Mars, all I could think was Dave Chappelle. Mars, bitches, MARS. Like, that was one of the funniest skits.
Oh shit. Hilarious, man. Well, if you had any other questions, this is the time. If not, then that's it, man. You got any other questions?
Yeah. I could keep going on this. So like
Do
you
it.
leaving it open. So tell me about your writing process. Cause like I just was like, I need to write 1,500 words a day, right? And then I did that for about a week and I burned myself out.
Yeah.
And then I had to take like 2 days off and because I could only squeeze out like 50 words. And then I got back on it and was good. So what is your writing process like? How long does it take for you to write a book?
Yep. So in the beginning, it took me 6 to 9 months. Nowadays, I could essentially write a book per week if I choose to. But obviously, I got other things going on, so I just kind of I stage my books out,
Mhm,
stretch them out a little bit. So my
mhm.
process is like to your point, writing 1,500 words a day. I can't do that. Like, and again, I think physically writing something takes away so much time. So what I've learned to do is capture content. So podcasting, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Creating videos, YouTube. So part of my podcasting is I'm interviewing individual people. We're having this great conversation. This conversation may spark something in my mind, like talking about Mars, talking about Interstellar. Then I may create a video on that, right? Or I may take a topic about branding and I may create a video on that branding. But what I've done is I before I create this content, I go in and I just create bullet lists. I'm like, okay, what am I going to cover? I'm going to cover these three core things about branding or brand strategy or about storytelling. And then what are my quick takeaways? Okay, that's a good takeaway. That's a good takeaway. That's a good takeaway. And then after that's like, what's the call to action? What do I want the reader to do? And I'll do that for all of these particular sections. They become my chapters. And then I record a video, launch it on YouTube. Again, you create 3 or 4 different videos, 5, 6, 10 videos,
Mhm.
transcribe those videos, take my bulleted list and compile them together. And now I have my chapter outlines and I have my core body of content from my own first voice. And then what I can do is take that and before I clean it up, I'll give it to a ghostwriter and say, okay, look, I've written out about 5,000 words. Here's the topics. Here's my tonality. Here's my voice. Here's my key takeaways. Here's my call of actions. I need you to fluff it up a little bit. I need you to kind of do a little bit of research. Take a article section from over here. Find me some data from resource over here. Pull those sources together, and I want this 5,000 words to now become 15,000 words. Then I'll take that 15,000 words and I'll give it to someone to edit, and then that's a book.
Mhm. Wow. So, okay. You've simplified the process, or you've set up a process that you can follow. Um, but by using the ghostwriter, it's helping you augment, right? So you're not spending all the time doing that stuff. So that makes sense. Yeah, like I wrote out the topics I wanted to talk about in like notepad kind of thing. And then I came back and I said, okay, what are the subtopics to these main topics? And it was like, I was trying to get 3 to 5 in each one of those. And then I sat down with that and looked at that and said, okay, I need to write about this today. And I need to talk about all these different things. So, but yeah, I mean, the 1,500 words, that was like somebody going, yeah, I think I could bench 200 pounds or 250 or whatever. And you like bring it down and push it back up once, and you're like, oh, that was really hard. And then you do it again, and you're like, not quite getting it there. It's like kind of need to work up to that. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
so, so yeah, that's uh, yeah,
So if
okay.
you're creating video content or if you're creating audio content, I mean, the 1,500 words, you can easily do that in a few minutes, right? You can kind of talk to the audience, talk to your clientele, testimonial, whatever it is, just talk. And then again, you're giving value add. Just think
Mhm,
about the formula of the value add. The formula is my topic, my takeaway, and the action.
mhm,
Topic, takeaway, action. As long as you stick to those three, whoever's going to receive that content in a book format from you, they're going to get value from it. So
mhm,
that's my current formula to where I'm writing essentially all my books moving forward. And like my first books, when I first started, it was kind of like, I want to talk about these 1,000 topics and I'm going to condense them into this one book. And I was like, okay, that's not going to happen. How do I take one book and create a series? So then I created a formula for creating series. And then I was like, okay, now I got these series of books. What's the next step? Then I had to kind of go back in and revise. I was like, I had to make sure that every single chapter I have a key takeaway. Every single chapter I need to have some kind of call of action. And then
mhm,
obviously the extra cherries on top is um, a quote or a testimonial, something that visual people can kind of look at and be like, huh, okay, Steve Jobs said that. That's cool. That's interesting. And they can
mhm.
hold on to that thing. And that's just, you put those pieces of puzzles together, then it becomes very transparent how you can step and repeat creating content or creating books forever.
Yeah. I actually structured mine a little bit differently, but I like the way you did yours. So I because I'm a movie fanatic, I structured it in three acts. And so it's like the science, right? So here's the proof. Um, and then from there it was like you go through the proof. Okay, I get here's what's happening. Then I go through and say, how do you tell a good story, right? Break it all down, give lots of examples, show how you can tell a story in a tagline, you can tell a story in an email, all those different ways. And kind of go, here's the recipe, right? Like here's the components you need. You need the eggs, you need the flour, you need the butter, you need the sugar, you need the salt, and then the third act, that's where all the actionable stuff is. Now, here's how you apply this, right? And I talk about how to write an email, how to, do branding, how to, do all these different things. And then I actually added like a bonus section, which was like 6 or 7 chapters that are related, but not they're adjacent or parallel to. So like I talked about like mindset stuff, right? Because if you're running a startup, you're going to be dealing with mindset stuff or a small business or you're an entrepreneur. I talk about vision. I talk about all those other things that while the book is not directly about those, I thought it was important, but that's why I called it bonus chapters. Um, and something else that I did, I think that you'll get a kick out of, and probably the audience will too, because I'm such a movie fanatic. I love soundtracks to movies, and being a former rave DJ, I just like music in general. So every chapter has a song that goes with it, and there's a
Nice.
Spotify playlist and a YouTube playlist, so you can listen to music while you read the book. And
Nice.
each chapter either uh, what they're saying in the song relates to what I'm talking about in the chapter, or it captures the feel of that chapter. Um, like the first chapter is called the anti-boring ass introduction, because I hate freaking introductions where the authors are just sitting there fluffing their nuts for like like what seems like 1,000 words, and I'm like, just get to the fucking point, dude. And so for that chapter, I used Welcome to the Jungle by Guns N' Roses, and it just kind of kicks off from there. And the music is all over the place. I mean, I got 80s pop, I got hip hop, I got uh, you know, French musicians, Australian musicians, I got like all this music. And so I tried to create more of an experience
Yeah. Yeah.
with it. So
Yeah, I,
uh,
I think I definitely love that concept. I mean, to your point, I mean, you're not just telling the story on the literary side, you're also communicating it through the music side. So anyone that
yeah,
actually reads and listens to the music at the same time, you're already filling in that void for them before they even have to ask for it. So it's a good, solid concept. I mean, it's something that if anyone's listening and you're writing a book right now, you probably want to start creating some playlists to go along with your chapters. It's a great idea.
yeah, because like I mean, I wish I could put the music in the book, but then I'd have royalty issues. But
You could do QR codes in a book, right? So I mean, obviously you could say, "Hey, scan this to go here," and then once they get to Spotify, wherever that you send them to, then they could deal with that on that side.
yeah, I set the links in the book, so you should be able to just click on it and then have it open up. Although I don't
And the
know how.
Kindle.
Yeah, like I don't know how that's, or you'll have, or you can just search it, right? Like you can search "How to Hack Humans" on Spotify right now, and you'll find the playlist. Um, so um, so anyway, just a different perspective on how I put things together versus how you put things together. But I like the idea of actually putting the actionable thing in each chapter and not leaving it to the final third. I think that makes a lot of sense. So
Yeah, and it took me a while to figure that out because again, I was like, okay, somebody's going to read this book and they're going to read the entire book. Then I started reading more and more books. I started listening to more and more audiobooks, and I started realizing that damn, as people, we jump around.
yeah.
So if they jump from chapter 2 to chapter 7 and back to chapter 4, and then I have at the end of the book all this Q&A stuff, and then like damn, they'll miss the items that I want them to really cover. So splitting it up in smaller bites and giving them smaller steps on the journey, no matter what chapter they get into, then they'll have access to that. But I mean, to your point, what you're talking about with those links, I think those links are definitely cool because in my books, what I use is QR codes. Like I'll take QR codes and I'll use them for everything. If I'm talking about a particular product, I'm gonna have a QR code in there. So for you, if you have music, I would say when you get to your physical book to put those QR codes in there and make them trackable. So you can kind of see, okay, I have a book, I have 10 songs, and I'm scanning it with a QR code. Then you can kind of say, okay, you know what? This one song on chapter 5, I've had 10,000 downloads more than anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
Then you kind of take that song and kind of like utilize that song a little bit more because obviously like your audience is more communicated with that one particular item versus all the songs.
Yeah, I didn't actually. None of my songs are in the playlist because I'm still working on my EP to get it on Spotify. It'll be up there at the end of the year, but I don't have any of my stuff. But that does. I like that point because I'm always trying to figure out how to improve, and so that's a great tip. I really appreciate that.
Cool. Well, I definitely appreciate it. I mean, I think you and I, we're so much alike. We could probably sit here and talk for another 5 hours and end up being like a Joe Rogan episode, right? Like 5 hours into it. But I definitely appreciate you coming on the show today, man. It was definitely well worth having you. And I look forward to reading your book and seeing what else you come up with in the years to come.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I had a lot of fun. So thank you for having me.
It was great. S.A. Grant, over and out.